My boyfriend planned a surprise birthday party for me, but forgot to uninvite his ex-girlfriend. When I walked in and saw her sitting at our kitchen table wearing my favorite necklace, I realized this wasn't the surprise I was expecting. I'm 26F and have been dating Marcus 28M for about 8 months now. Things between us have been really good mostly. He's thoughtful, funny, and we have this easy chemistry that just works. We moved in together about 3 months ago, which felt like the natural next step since we were practically living together anyway. The only issue has been his ex-girlfriend Sophia. They dated for 2 years and broke up about a year before we met. Marcus always insisted they were just friends now, but I noticed some things that bothered me. She still had a key to his apartment when we first started dating. She would text him late at night about random stuff, and whenever we'd run into her around town, she'd act overly familiar with him. I tried not to be the jealous girlfriend because I hate that stereotype. Marcus would always reassure me that Sophia was just a friend, and that I had nothing to worry about. He'd show me their text conversations when I asked, and they seemed innocent enough, just casual check-ins and memes mostly. My birthday was last Tuesday, and Marcus had been acting secretive for weeks. He kept asking what I wanted to do, and then dismissing my suggestions, saying he had something better planned. When I pressed him for details, he'd just smile and say it was a surprise. I figured he was planning something sweet, maybe dinner at that new restaurant I'd mentioned, or tickets to see my favorite band. The day of my birthday, Marcus insisted I go get my nails done and take my time. He said he needed a few hours to set everything up and that I should come home around 6 p.m. I was excited thinking about what kind of surprise he'd planned. We'd talked about how I'd never had a real surprise party and how fun that would be. I spent the afternoon at the nail salon, then grabbed coffee with my sister Emma, who lives nearby. She kept asking what Marcus had planned and seemed genuinely excited for me. Around 5:45, I headed home expecting to find decorations or maybe some of our friends waiting to surprise me. When I opened the front door, the lights were dimmed and I could hear voices coming from the kitchen. My heart jumped, thinking this was it, the surprise party I'd always wanted. I called out that I was home and walked toward the kitchen with a huge smile on my face. But when I rounded the corner into the kitchen, my smile disappeared immediately. There was Sophia sitting at our kitchen table with a glass of wine, looking completely comfortable, like she belonged there. She was wearing the delicate gold necklace I'd left on the bathroom counter that morning, my favorite necklace that my grandmother had given me. Marcus was standing by the stove stirring something that smelled like pasta sauce. He looked up when I walked in, and his face went through this weird series of expressions. First surprise, then panic, then this forced casual smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Happy birthday, babe," he said, trying to sound normal. I thought it would be nice to have Sophia over for dinner since it's been a while since we all hung out together. I just stared at him, then at her, then back at him. This was my surprise birthday dinner, just the three of us, with his ex-girlfriend wearing my jewelry. Sophia smiled and lifted her wine glass in my direction. "Happy birthday, girl," she said, like we were old friends. Marcus made this amazing sauce from scratch. He always was such a good cook, wasn't he? The way she said it implied so much history between them, all those meals he'd cooked for her during their relationship. I looked around the kitchen and noticed other details that made my stomach turn. 2 wine glasses were already empty on the counter, meaning they'd been drinking together for a while before I got home. The pasta was clearly homemade, which Marcus had never done for me in 8 months of dating. And there were candles lit, but not birthday candles, just the romantic ones from our bedroom. I asked Marcus if I could talk to him privately. We went into our bedroom and I quietly asked what the hell was going on. Why was Sophia here on my birthday wearing my necklace like she lived here? Marcus got defensive, immediately saying I was overreacting and that he thought it would be nice to include Sophia, since she'd been feeling lonely lately. When I pointed out that she was wearing my necklace, he claimed he hadn't noticed, said maybe she'd picked it up by mistake when she was using our bathroom. I reminded him that I'd left it on the counter that morning, which meant she'd deliberately put it on. Marcus just shrugged and said we should get back to dinner before the food got cold. I followed him back to the kitchen, feeling like I was in some alternate reality. This was supposed to be my special day, and instead I felt like an intruder in my own home. Sophia had made herself completely comfortable, refilling her wine glass and checking her phone like she was just hanging out at home. During dinner, the conversation was painfully awkward. Sophia kept bringing up memories from her and Marcus's relationship. "Remember when we went to that little Italian place in the mountains? Oh, this reminds me of that time you made pasta for my parents. Do you still make that chocolate cake I used to love?" Every comment was designed to remind me that she had years of history with him that I didn't. Marcus seemed oblivious to how inappropriate this all was. He'd laugh at her memories and add his own details about their past adventures. Meanwhile, I sat there picking at my food, feeling completely invisible. This was supposed to be about celebrating my birthday, but somehow it had become a trip down memory lane for them. The worst part was when Sophia started talking about how much she missed spending time at this apartment, how it felt like home to her still. She mentioned specific things about our place that bothered me, like how she'd helped Marcus pick out the couch I sat on every day, or how they'd painted the bedroom walls together the color that I woke up to every morning. I excused myself to go to the bathroom just to get away from the table for a minute. When I looked in the mirror, I could see my grandmother's necklace around Sophia's neck through the doorway. She was wearing my jewelry in my home on my birthday while talking about all the memories she shared with my boyfriend. When I came back to the kitchen, I heard them talking quietly about something. They stopped as soon as they saw me, which made it obvious they'd been discussing something they didn't want me to hear. Marcus immediately started talking loudly about dessert, but the damage was done. They'd been having private conversations while I was out of the room. After dinner, Sophia showed no signs of leaving. She helped Marcus clear the table like she'd done it 1,000 times before. She knew where everything went in our kitchen better than I did. When I mentioned that it was getting late, she just smiled and said the night was still young. Marcus didn't say anything to encourage encourage her to leave. Around 9 p.m., I finally had enough. I told Sophia directly that I was tired and wanted to spend the rest of my birthday alone with Marcus. She looked genuinely surprised, like it hadn't occurred to her that she might be overstaying her welcome. Marcus looked uncomfortable but didn't back me up, which hurt more than anything. Sophia made a big show of gathering her things slowly, while talking about how much fun dinner had been. She hugged Marcus goodbye for way too long and told him to call her soon about that thing they'd discussed. When she finally left, she was still wearing my necklace. I was too exhausted to fight about it anymore. After she left, Marcus tried to salvage the evening. He pulled out a birthday cake he'd apparently made earlier and sang happy birthday to me, but the whole thing felt hollow and forced. This wasn't the romantic birthday surprise I'd imagined. It felt like I'd been an afterthought in someone else's reunion. When I asked Marcus why he thought having his ex-girlfriend over for my birthday dinner was a good idea, he got defensive again. He said Sophia was going through a hard time and needed friends, that I was being selfish for not wanting to include her, that he thought I was secure enough in our relationship to handle spending time with his friends. I tried to explain that this wasn't about insecurity, it was about basic boundaries and respect, that inviting your ex-girlfriend to your current girlfriend's birthday dinner without asking was inappropriate regardless of the circumstances. Marcus just rolled his eyes and said I was being dramatic. The fight escalated from there. I brought up all the little things that had been bothering me about Sophia's presence in our relationship. The late-night texts, the overfamiliarity, the way she acted like she still had claim to him. Marcus accused me of being jealous and controlling. We went to bed angry, which has never happened before in our relationship. I lay there thinking about how wrong the whole evening had felt, how invisible I'd been at my own birthday dinner, how comfortable Sophia had been in my space wearing my jewelry, how Marcus had prioritized her feelings over mine on what was supposed to be my special day. The next morning, Marcus acted like nothing had happened. He made coffee and tried to be affectionate, but I was still upset. When I brought up the necklace, he said he'd text Sophia to bring it back. But hours passed and no text was sent that I could see. That afternoon, I decided to handle the necklace situation myself. I texted Sophia directly asking her to return my grandmother's necklace that she'd taken by mistake. Her response was immediate and shocking. She said it wasn't a mistake and that Marcus had given it to her as a gift. According to her, he'd said it reminded him of the necklace he'd bought her for their first anniversary. I confronted Marcus immediately. He denied giving her the necklace and claimed she must be lying or confused. But when I pressed him about why he'd never mentioned that he'd bought similar jewelry for his ex, he got quiet. Finally, he admitted that yes, he'd bought Sophia a similar necklace years ago, but insisted that had nothing to do with mine. That's when the pieces started falling into place. The pasta dinner had been something special he used to make for Sophia. The candles were the same ones they'd used during romantic dinners. Even the wine was a bottle I'd never seen before that he claimed was left over from some party. Everything about my birthday dinner had been recreated from his relationship with her. I spent the next few days thinking about everything, and the more I analyzed that birthday dinner, the more disturbed I became. It wasn't just that Marcus had invited his ex-girlfriend to my birthday. It was that he'd essentially recreated a romantic evening from their past relationship and made me a third wheel to my own celebration. I decided to do some investigating of my own. I started paying closer attention to things around our apartment that I'd previously overlooked. The throw pillows on our couch that Sophia had mentioned picking out with Marcus weren't just similar to ones I might have chosen, they were expensive designer pieces that seemed out of character for Marcus's usual budget-conscious shopping. The coffee table books about photography that seemed random since Marcus wasn't into photography, but Sophia was a freelance photographer. When I flipped through them, I found handwritten notes in the margins in Sophia's handwriting, comments about lighting techniques and composition that were clearly personal observations, not something you'd write in someone else's book. Even the way our bedroom was arranged felt like it had been designed by someone else. The dresser was positioned at an odd angle that blocked part of the window. When I asked Marcus about it, he said it had always been that way, but I remembered helping him move that same dresser when I first started staying over regularly. Someone had moved it since then, and it wasn't me. The bathroom held more clues. The expensive shampoo and conditioner that Marcus claimed he'd bought on sale were brands I'd never seen him use before. When I checked the bottles, I found long dark hairs stuck to the caps. Sophia had long dark hair. I had short blonde hair. These weren't my products, and Marcus's hair was too short to leave those kinds of strands. When I looked through Marcus's phone while he was in the shower, I found conversations with Sophia going back months before my birthday. Not just casual friend texts, but deep emotional conversations about their relationship and whether they'd made a mistake breaking up. Messages where she talked about missing the way he used to make her coffee in the morning and how no one else understood her sense of humor the way he did. Marcus would respond with heart emojis and comments about how special their connection had been, how he sometimes wondered what would have happened if they'd tried harder to work through their problems. These weren't the conversations of two people who had moved on and become platonic friends. These were the conversations of two people who were emotionally cheating. The most damaging conversation was from 2 weeks before my birthday. Sophia had texted that she'd been thinking about him constantly and wondering if they could try again. She said she'd been dating other people, but no one compared to what they'd had together. Marcus responded that he cared about her deeply, but was with me now and didn't want to hurt anyone. Then Sophia suggested they should spend more time together to figure out their feelings. She said maybe if they could see each other in a casual setting with me there, it would help them understand what they really wanted. Marcus agreed and said my birthday dinner would be a good opportunity to see how we all got along together. So my birthday dinner hadn't been planned as a celebration for me at all. It had been planned as a trial run to see if Marcus could have both of us in his life, a way for him to test the waters with Sophia while keeping me around as backup crack up. The pasta dinner, the candles, the wine, all of it had been designed to recreate their romantic dynamic while making me watch. I screenshot everything before Marcus got out of the shower, then cleared the browser history and put his phone back exactly where I'd found it. Then I spent the rest of that day pretending everything was normal while planning my next move. Marcus had no idea I'd discovered his real intentions, or that I knew about his ongoing emotional affair with Sophia. That evening, I told Marcus I wanted to plan something special for us that weekend. Said I thought we should have a dinner party and invite some friends over since we hadn't entertained in our new place yet. He seemed excited about the idea and asked who I wanted to invite. I suggested we invite Sophia since she'd seemed to enjoy our last dinner so much, and it would be nice to include her in our friend group. Marcus's face lit up when I mentioned Sophia, and he immediately agreed that including her was a great idea. He even offered to help with the cooking and asked if I wanted him to make that pasta dish again, since it had been such a hit. I smiled and said that sounded perfect while internally plotting his downfall. Over the next few days, I planned what I privately called my revenge dinner party. I invited Sophia plus several of our mutual friends, including my sister Emma, who had strong opinions about cheaters, and Marcus's college roommate Jake, who I knew was extremely loyal and would be disgusted by emotional affairs. I also invited our neighbors Tom and Sarah, who were a solid couple that had been together for 8 years. I told everyone except Sophia that it was a couple's dinner party and to bring their significant others. I specifically told Sophia it was just a casual friend dinner and that she should come alone. When Marcus asked about the guest list, I was vague, saying I'd invited a mix of people and that it would be fun to have everyone meet each other. I spent the week before the dinner party doing research. I looked up Sophia's social media accounts that I'd previously avoided and found photos of her and Marcus together that had been taken recently. Not old photos from their relationship, but new ones from the past few months. Pictures of them at coffee shops, restaurants, and even at what looked like a concert, all taken during times when Marcus had told me he was working late or hanging out with his guy friends. The day of the dinner party, I spent hours cooking Marcus's favorite meal, the one he always said reminded him of his childhood, and made him feel loved. I set the table with our good dishes and bought expensive wine that I knew everyone would appreciate. To Marcus, it probably looked like I was making an effort to include Sophia in our social circle and create a harmonious friend group. I also set up my phone to record audio during dinner. I wasn't sure exactly how the evening would unfold, but I wanted to have evidence of whatever happened. I positioned my phone on the kitchen counter where it could pick up conversations from the dining room without being obvious. When guests started arriving around 7 p.m., the dynamic immediately felt different than my birthday dinner. Our friends brought their partners, and the conversation was lively and inclusive. Emma arrived with her boyfriend David, who I'd specifically asked her to bring because he was a lawyer and had strong opinions about honesty in relationships. Sophia showed up wearing a dress that was clearly too fancy for a casual dinner party and seemed surprised to see so many couples. She kept looking around the room like she was trying to figure out what kind of event this actually was. When Marcus introduced her to people as his good friend, I watched her face carefully and saw a flash of disappointment. During cocktails, I made sure to circulate and talk to everyone about their relationships. I asked Tom and Sarah about their anniversary plans and had Emma and David tell the story of how they met. I wanted to establish the evening as being about celebrating committed relationships before I dropped my bombshell. I waited until everyone had a few drinks and we were all seated for dinner before I made my announcement. I stood up and clinked my wine glass to get everyone's attention. Then I told our friends that I had something important to share about my relationship with Marcus and wanted their advice as people who cared about both of us. I started by thanking everyone for coming and saying how much I valued their friendships, how important it was to me to have people in my life who would tell me the truth even when it was difficult to hear. Then I told them about my birthday dinner and how confused I'd been by Marcus's decision to invite his ex-girlfriend to what was supposed to be a romantic celebration. Several people looked uncomfortable and shot glances at Marcus and Sophia. Emma immediately looked angry because I told her previously that my birthday had been perfect and that Marcus had done something really special for me. She was realizing now that I'd been lying to protect Marcus's reputation. I explained that I'd initially tried to be understanding because I didn't want to be a jealous girlfriend, but that I'd since discovered text messages between Marcus and Sophia that revealed they'd been having an emotional affair for months. I pulled out my phone and started reading selected messages aloud, including the ones about missing each other and wondering if they'd made a mistake breaking up. The room went completely silent except for Tom, who muttered what the hell under his breath. Marcus started to protest, saying I was taking things out of context, but I held up my hand and said I wasn't finished. Then I explained how my birthday dinner had actually been planned as a trial run to see if Marcus could manage having both of us in his life. I told our friends about the necklace incident and how Sophia had claimed Marcus gave it to her as a gift, how everything about that dinner from the pasta recipe to the candles had been recreated from Marcus and Sophia's past relationship, how I'd been made to feel like an intruder at my own birthday celebration, while they reminisced about their romantic history. When I finished talking, the silence was deafening. Everyone was staring at Marcus and Sophia, who both looked like they wanted to disappear into the floor. My sister Emma was the first to speak, asking Marcus directly if what I'd said was true. Instead of denying it, Marcus tried to justify his behavior, saying that he and Sophia had unresolved feelings, and he was trying to figure things out without hurting anyone. Jake, Marcus's college roommate, immediately called him out, saying, "That's not how you handle a relationship," and that if he wanted to explore things with his ex, he should have broken up with me first. That leading someone on while emotionally cheating was cowardly and selfish. David, the lawyer, nodded and said what Marcus had done could be considered emotional abuse. Sarah looked disgusted and said she couldn't imagine Tom ever putting her in that kind of situation, that using someone's birthday to test drive another relationship was psychotic behavior. Tom agreed and said any decent man would have ended things cleanly before pursuing someone else. Sophia tried to defend herself, saying she hadn't meant to cause problems and that she'd just been honest about her feelings. But Emma shut that down immediately, pointing out that pursuing someone in a committed relationship wasn't being honest, it was being a homewrecker. That if she really cared about Marcus, she would have stayed out of his life until he was single. David asked Sophia directly if she'd known that Marcus and I were living together when she started having these emotional conversations with him. When she admitted that yes, she'd known, Sophia said that made her behavior even worse, that she'd deliberately tried to break up a relationship for her own selfish desires. The dinner party devolved from there, with everyone taking sides and Marcus becoming increasingly defensive. He accused me of ambushing him and making their private business public. I responded that he'd made it public when he decided to use my birthday as relationship therapy with his ex-girlfriend in my own home. Jake told Marcus he was disappointed in him and that this wasn't the kind of man he'd thought his friend was, that he'd always respected Marcus, but now he was questioning everything he thought he knew about his character. The betrayal in Jake's voice was obvious, and I could see it hitting Marcus hard. Sophia started crying and saying she couldn't handle the confrontation and that she'd never meant for things to go this far. As she was gathering her purse, I asked her in front of everyone to return my grandmother's necklace that she'd taken from my bathroom. She claimed she'd forgotten to bring it, but promised to drop it off later. Emma immediately demanded to know what necklace, and when I explained that Sophia had taken my grandmother's jewelry from my bathroom on my birthday, everyone looked even more disgusted. Sarah said taking someone's jewelry was theft, and that Sophia should return it immediately or face legal consequences. David offered to help me file a police report if the necklace wasn't returned within 24 hours. Sophia looked panicked and said she'd bring it by tomorrow, but that she didn't deserve to be treated like a criminal. Tom laughed and said taking someone's jewelry and lying about it was literally criminal behavior. Sophia left, first claiming she couldn't handle the confrontation anymore and that everyone was being mean to her. As she walked out, Emma called after her that she'd better return that necklace or there would be consequences. I felt a surge of gratitude for my sister's fierce loyalty. After Sophia left, the other guests began leaving as well. Most of them stopped to tell me they thought I'd handled the situation well and that Marcus's behavior was completely unacceptable. Jake pulled me aside and apologized for not seeing what was happening sooner. He said he'd noticed Marcus acting strange lately but hadn't realized the extent of his deception. Emma stayed to help clean up and told me she was proud of me for standing up for myself instead of being a doormat. She said she'd suspected something was wrong based on my behavior lately but hadn't wanted to pry. David offered to help me with any legal issues that might arise from the necklace theft or if I needed help with lease issues when Marcus moved out. Marcus and I had the biggest fight of our relationship that night. He accused me of embarrassing him in front of our friends and said I could have handled things privately. I reminded him that he'd had months to handle things privately and had chosen instead to deceive me and use my birthday as his relationship experiment. When I told him I wanted him to move out, he said I was overreacting and that we could work through this with couples counseling. I laughed and asked why I'd want to work on a relationship with someone who couldn't decide if he wanted to be with me or his ex-girlfriend, that I deserved better than being someone's backup plan. Marcus tried to guilt trip me by saying he'd given up his old apartment to move in with me and that he had nowhere to go. I reminded him that Sophia seemed very interested in rekindling their relationship and suggested he could stay with her. He claimed that wasn't an option because she was still living with roommates, but I could see in his eyes that he was already considering it. The fight continued for hours, with Marcus alternating between apologies and blame. He'd say he was sorry for hurting me, then immediately follow it up with accusations that I was being vindictive and cruel. When I pointed out this pattern, he accused me of analyzing everything he said like a therapist instead of just accepting his apology. Finally, I told him the conversation was over and that he needed to sleep on the couch. When he tried to follow me into our bedroom, I locked the door and ignored his knocking. I could hear him pacing around the living room for hours before he finally settled down on the couch. The next morning, Marcus tried a different approach. He brought me coffee in bed and apologized for how he'd handled things with Sophia. He claimed he'd been confused about his feelings, but that he'd realized during the dinner party that he wanted to be with me, that seeing everyone's reactions had made him understand how wrong he'd been. I told him it was too late for that realization, that the time to choose me was months ago when Sophia first started pursuing him, not after he'd been publicly humiliated in front of our friends, that I couldn't trust someone who had to be shamed into doing the right thing. Marcus begged me to go to couples counseling, saying he was willing to cut all contact with Sophia and do whatever it took to rebuild my trust. I asked him why I should put effort into fixing a relationship with someone who had spent months plotting behind my back, that if he really loved me, he never would have entertained Sophia's advances in the first place. Over the next few days, word spread about what had happened at the dinner party. Our friend group was small enough that everyone heard different versions of the story within 48 hours. Most people were supportive of me, but a few suggested I should have tried to work things out privately with Marcus before making it public. Jake called me the day after the dinner party to check on me and share some information he thought I should know. Apparently, Marcus had been talking to their mutual friends about his confusion over his feelings for Sophia for weeks before my birthday. Several people had advised him to break up with me if he wasn't sure about our relationship, but he'd said he didn't want to make any hasty decisions. Emma also did some investigating of her own and discovered that Sophia had been posting cryptic social media messages about getting back together with an ex for months. Posts about how sometimes the best relationships are the ones you fight to get back and how true love always finds a way. She'd been publicly campaigning for Marcus Marcus's attention while I was clueless. Sophia never returned my necklace despite my 24-hour ultimatum. When I texted her about it, she claimed she'd lost it somewhere and offered to pay for a replacement. I told her the necklace was irreplaceable since it had belonged to my grandmother and that I'd be filing a police report if it wasn't returned immediately. She finally admitted she still had it, but said she wasn't comfortable seeing me in person to return it after how I'd treated her at the dinner party. I reminded her that she'd stolen my jewelry and emotionally manipulated my boyfriend, and that she was lucky I hadn't pressed charges already. I asked Emma to retrieve the necklace for me since Sophia apparently felt safer dealing with a neutral party. When Emma met up with Sophia at a coffee shop, she reported back that Sophia had asked multiple questions about whether Marcus and I were really over, and if there was a chance they could reconcile without any interference from me. Emma told her that ship had sailed when she decided to pursue someone else's boyfriend and steal his girlfriend's jewelry. She also warned Sophia that if any of my belongings went missing in the future, or if she continued to harass me, there would be legal consequences. Marcus moved out the following weekend, taking only his personal belongings and leaving furniture we'd bought together. He tried one more time to convince me we should work things out, saying that everyone makes mistakes and that he'd learned from this experience. I told him that betraying someone's trust and using their birthday to test drive your ex-girlfriend wasn't a mistake. It was a series of calculated choices. When Marcus asked if he could keep the coffee maker we'd bought together, I said no, since I'd actually paid for it and had the receipt to prove it. He seemed surprised that I was keeping track of who had paid for what, but I'd been documenting our shared expenses since we moved in together, just in case something like this happened. The process of dividing our belongings revealed how little Marcus had actually contributed to our shared life. Most of the furniture, decorations, and household items had been purchased by me. Marcus had mainly contributed clothes, video games, and electronics. It became clear that I'd been financially supporting our lifestyle more than I'd realized. 3 weeks after Marcus moved out, I heard through Jake that he and Sophia had started dating officially. The news didn't hurt as much as I expected it to. If anything, it confirmed that I'd made the right decision. They'd been planning this reunion for months, and I'd just been the obstacle in their way. Jake also mentioned that several of their mutual friends had distanced themselves from Marcus after learning about his behavior, that his reputation in their friend group had taken a serious hit, and that people were questioning his character in ways that went beyond just relationship issues. My sister Emma helped me redecorate the apartment to make it feel more like my space, and less like a shrine to Marcus and Sophia's past relationship. We painted the bedroom a soft blue color that I'd always loved, but Marcus had said was too feminine. We rearranged the furniture to create better flow and got rid of those expensive throw pillows that Sophia had chosen. The photography books went to Goodwill, along with the expensive hair products and anything else that reminded me of Sophia's presence in my home. I replaced them with things that reflected my actual interests and personality, rather than trying to accommodate someone else's preferences. About a month after the breakup, I ran into Marcus at our local grocery store. He looked tired and stressed and immediately tried to start a conversation about how much he missed me and our life together. I kept the interaction brief and polite, but didn't engage with his attempts to reminisce about our relationship. When he asked if I'd be willing to meet for coffee to talk about things, I told him there was nothing left to discuss. He'd made his choice when he decided to use my birthday as audition night for his ex-girlfriend. I wished him well with Sophia and walked away feeling lighter than I had in months. Marcus called me later that night, leaving a voicemail about how he'd made the biggest mistake of his life and begged me to give him another chance. He said things with Sophia weren't working out the way he'd expected, and that he realized now what he'd lost. I deleted the message without responding. The whole experience taught me important lessons about boundaries and self-respect. I learned that being understanding and accommodating doesn't mean accepting disrespectful behavior, that someone who truly loves you won't make you compete for their attention with an ex-girlfriend, especially on your birthday. I also learned to trust my instincts about red flags in relationships. All those little things that had bothered me about Sophia's presence in our relationship had been valid concerns, not jealous paranoia. My gut had been telling me something was wrong for months, but I'd ignored it to avoid being labeled as the crazy girlfriend. Looking back, I'm almost grateful that Marcus planned that disaster of a birthday dinner. If he'd been more subtle about his emotional affair, I might have wasted years trying to make things work with someone who wasn't fully committed to our relationship. His blatant disregard for my feelings showed me exactly who he was underneath the charming facade. 6 months later, I'm thriving in my newly redecorated apartment. I've started dating again casually and have learned to trust my instincts about red flags in relationships. Any man who maintains inappropriate contact with his ex-girlfriend gets eliminated immediately. Life's too short to play second fiddle to someone's past. I've also become more selective about who I let into my personal space. The apartment that once felt contaminated by Sophia's presence now feels like a sanctuary that belongs entirely to me. I've learned the value of having a space that reflects your own personality, rather than compromising to accommodate someone else's history. The final update on Marcus and Sophia came through Jake, who ran into them at a restaurant last month. Apparently, they were having a heated argument about Marcus being too clingy and Sophia missing her independence. Jake overheard Sophia saying she'd made a mistake and that their relationship had been better as a fantasy than as reality. According to Jake, they looked miserable together and seemed to be going through the motions of a relationship rather than actually enjoying each other's company. Marcus kept trying to hold Sophia's hand and she kept pulling away. The passion they'd thought they were missing with other people apparently wasn't there when they were actually together. Jake also mentioned that Marcus had been asking mutual friends about me and whether I was dating anyone new. When Jake told him it was none of his business, Marcus got defensive and said he just just wanted to make sure I was okay. Jake told him the best way to ensure my well-being was to leave me alone completely. As for my grandmother's necklace, I eventually got it back when Emma threatened to involve the police. Sophia had been wearing it regularly, according to photos on her social media, and was reluctant to give it up, but finally returned it when she realized I wasn't backing down from pressing charges. When Emma brought the necklace back to me, she said Sophia had tried to negotiate keeping it by offering to pay me for it. Emma told her that stolen jewelry wasn't for sale, and that she was lucky I wasn't pursuing criminal charges. The necklace now sits safely in my jewelry box where it belongs. The birthday dinner from hell ended up being one of the best things that happened to me. It revealed Marcus's true character and saved me from wasting more time on someone who didn't deserve my loyalty. Sometimes the worst surprises lead to the best outcomes if you're brave enough to act on what you learn. These days, when I tell the story of my birthday dinner, people are always shocked by Marcus's audacity. The idea of inviting your ex-girlfriend to your current girlfriend's birthday dinner is so inappropriate that most people can't believe someone would actually do it, but it happened, and now it's a cautionary tale I share with friends about trusting your instincts. I'm planning my next birthday celebration now, and it's going to be everything that disaster dinner wasn't. Just me and people who actually care about celebrating me rather than using my special day for their own agenda. No ex-girlfriends allowed, and definitely no emotional manipulation disguised as romantic gestures. The experience also taught me about the importance of having friends who will call out bad behavior when they see it. Emma, Jake, David, and my other friends didn't hesitate to tell Marcus exactly what they thought of his actions. Having people in your life who will stand up for you makes all the difference when you're dealing with betrayal. 2 months after the dinner party disaster, I got an unexpected call from Marcus's mother, Linda. She'd apparently heard about what happened through Jake's girlfriend, who was friends with her neighbor. Linda apologized profusely for her son's behavior and said she was ashamed of how he'd treated me. She explained that she'd always liked me and had hoped Marcus would propose soon. When I told her about the emotional affair and the birthday dinner setup, she was horrified. Linda said she'd raised Marcus to be better than that and couldn't understand where she'd gone wrong in teaching him about respect and loyalty. The conversation with Linda was both healing and heartbreaking. She shared stories about Marcus as a child and how he'd always been the type to want his cake and eat it too. How he'd struggled with commitment even as a teenager when it came to choosing between different activities or friend groups. She'd hoped he'd outgrown that tendency, but apparently not. Linda also revealed some information that explained a lot about Marcus's behavior. Apparently, he'd been in therapy briefly after his breakup with Sophia because he'd struggled with the decision to end things. The therapist had told him he needed to be sure about his choices and not rush into new relationships until he'd processed his feelings about Sophia. But instead of doing the work, Marcus had started dating me as a distraction from his unresolved emotions. Linda said she'd been concerned when he moved in with me so quickly after we'd started dating, but had assumed he knew what he was doing. Now she realized he'd been using our relationship to avoid dealing with his real feelings. The call with Linda lasted over an hour, and by the end, I felt like I had some closure about Marcus's behavior. It wasn't about me not being good enough or worthy of his love. It was about him being emotionally immature and unable to handle adult relationships in a healthy way. 3 months after the breakup, I started getting strange messages on social media from accounts I didn't recognize. Comments on my photos asking if I was single and whether I'd be interested in meeting up. At first, I thought it was just random guys being creepy online, but then I noticed a pattern. All the accounts were new with very few followers, and the messages had similar phrasing. When I did some investigating, I discovered they were all connected to the same IP address. Someone was creating fake profiles to contact me, and I had a pretty good idea who it was. I confronted Emma about whether she thought Marcus might be behind the fake accounts. She said it wouldn't surprise her since Jake had mentioned that Marcus had been asking lots of questions about my dating life and whether I'd moved on. Emma suggested I document everything in case I needed to file a harassment complaint. The fake account messages escalated over the next few weeks. Some were trying to get information about where I worked or lived. Others were more direct, asking if I missed my ex-boyfriend and whether I'd consider giving him another chance. A few were almost threatening, suggesting that I was making a mistake by not responding. I finally decided to confront the situation head-on. I created a public social media post with screenshots of all the fake messages and wrote about how pathetic it was when exes couldn't accept rejection and move on. I didn't name Marcus specifically, but anyone who knew our situation would understand exactly who I was talking about. The post got a huge response from friends and family who were disgusted by the harassment. Several people shared similar stories about exes who'd refused to accept breakups gracefully. Emma shared the post with a comment about how some people need to learn that no means no. Within hours of posting, Jake called me to say that Marcus had admitted to creating the fake accounts after Jake confronted him about it. Apparently, Marcus thought he was being clever by trying to gauge my interest in dating again without revealing his identity. Jake told him he was acting like a stalker and needed to seek professional help. The harassment stopped immediately after my public post. I think Marcus finally realized that his behavior was crossing legal boundaries and that I wasn't going to tolerate it. The fact that our entire friend group now knew about his creepy social media tactics probably motivated him to stop as well. Around this time, I also learned more details about how Marcus and Sophia's relationship was actually going. According to Jake, they'd moved in together quickly after I kicked Marcus out, but were already having serious problems. Sophia apparently expected Marcus to be the same person he'd been when they dated years ago, but people change and not always for the better. Jake said Marcus had become clingy and possessive with Sophia in ways he'd never been with me. He was constantly worried she'd leave him again, and was monitoring her social media Sophia and questioning her about male friends. The confident, charming man I'd fallen for had become an insecure mess who was driving Sophia away with his neediness. Sophia, meanwhile, was realizing that the grass wasn't greener on the other side. She'd built up her relationship with Marcus in her memory as this perfect love story, but the reality was much messier. According to mutual friends, she'd been complaining that Marcus was boring and that their relationship lacked the excitement she'd expected. The irony wasn't lost on me that Marcus was now experiencing the same kind of uncertainty about his relationship that he'd put me through. The difference was that I'd been loyal and committed while dealing with his emotional affair, whereas Sophia was already looking for exits after just a few months of commitment. 4 months after our breakup, I started dating someone new. His name is Alex, and he's everything Marcus wasn't: emotionally available, fully present in our relationship, and completely over his past romantic history. When I told him about the birthday dinner disaster, he was appalled and said he couldn't imagine treating someone so disrespectfully. Alex and I met through a hiking group I'd joined as part of my post-breakup self-improvement journey. He was leading a weekend trip to a nearby state park, and I was impressed by how considerate he was with all the participants. He made sure everyone felt included and safe, which was a refreshing change from Marcus's self-centered approach to group dynamics. Our first date was a simple coffee meeting that turned into a 4-hour conversation about everything from travel goals to family relationships. Alex was genuinely interested in my thoughts and opinions rather than waiting for his turn to talk. He asked thoughtful follow-up questions and remembered details from our previous conversations. When I told Alex about my recent breakup, he didn't pry for details or try to bash my ex. He simply said he was sorry I'd been hurt and that he hoped I was healing well. It was such a mature response compared to how Marcus used to gossip about his exes and make disparaging comments about their new relationships. The contrast between dating Alex and my relationship with Marcus was striking. Alex introduced me to his friends immediately, and they all welcomed me warmly. There were no ex-girlfriends lurking in the background or inappropriate text conversations to worry about. Alex had healthy boundaries with his past relationships and expected the same from partners. 6 months after the birthday dinner incident, I got a text from an unknown number that turned out to be Sophia. She was reaching out to apologize for her role in the destruction of my relationship with Marcus. According to her message, she'd realized that pursuing someone in a relationship had been wrong, regardless of her feelings. Sophia's text revealed that she and Marcus had broken up again, this time permanently. She said the relationship had been a disaster from the start and that they'd both been chasing a fantasy rather than building something real. She also mentioned that Marcus had been talking about me constantly and comparing her to me in ways that made her feel inadequate. The apology felt genuine, but I didn't respond immediately. I needed time to process whether I wanted any contact with Sophia or if it was better to leave the past in the past. After discussing it with Alex and Emma, I decided that accepting her apology might provide some closure for both of us. I sent a brief response thanking Sophia for the apology and saying that I hoped she'd learned from the experience. I also mentioned that I was happy in a new relationship and had moved on completely from the situation with Marcus. I made it clear that while I accepted her apology, I didn't want to maintain any kind of friendship or ongoing contact. Sophia responded with gratitude for my forgiveness and shared that she was also dating someone new who had no connection to our mutual friend group. She said she'd learned the importance of not pursuing people who weren't fully available and that she was committed to being more ethical in future relationships. The exchange with Sophia gave me a sense of closure I hadn't realized I needed. It confirmed that my instincts about her intentions had been correct and that Marcus's behavior had been as inappropriate as I'd thought. Hearing that their relationship had failed also validated my decision to end things rather than trying to compete for his attention. 7 months after the breakup, Marcus made one final attempt to contact me directly. He sent a long email apologizing for everything that had happened and asking if we could meet in person to talk. He claimed he'd been in therapy and had learned about his patterns of emotional unavailability and poor communication. The email was well written and seemed sincere, but I'd moved on completely by that point. I was happy with Alex and had no interest in revisiting my relationship with Marcus, even for closure purposes. I forwarded the email to Emma, who agreed that responding would likely just encourage more contact attempts. Instead of responding to Marcus, I blocked his email address and all his social media accounts. I also asked Alex and Emma to let me know if Marcus tried to contact me through them so I could document any harassment. Fortunately, he seemed to get the message and didn't make any further contact attempts. A year after the birthday dinner disaster, Alex and I moved in together. The experience of sharing space with someone who respected my boundaries and valued my happiness was revelatory. Alex never made me feel like I was competing for his attention or question whether I was good enough for his love. When we were apartment hunting, Alex made sure to choose a place that felt like ours, rather than trying to recreate any previous living situations. He was excited to build new traditions and memories, rather than being nostalgic about past relationships. The difference in emotional maturity was obvious. Our first shared birthday celebration was everything my disaster dinner with Marcus hadn't been. Alex planned a surprise party with just my closest friends and family, focusing entirely on celebrating me, rather than using the occasion for his own agenda. He gave a speech about how grateful he was to have me in his life that brought tears to my eyes. The contrast between Alex's birthday celebration and Marcus's disaster dinner highlighted just how wrong my previous relationship had been. Alex wanted to make me feel special and loved, whereas Marcus had used my birthday as relationship therapy with his ex. The difference was stark and reinforced how right I'd been to end things with Marcus. Recently, I ran into Jake at a coffee shop and got an update on Marcus's life. Apparently, he's been single since his breakup with Sophia, Florida and has been struggling with dating. Jake said Marcus seems to have learned some lessons from therapy, but still has work to do on his emotional availability and communication skills. According to Jake, Marcus had asked about me a few times and whether I seemed happy in my new relationship. Jake told him I was thriving and that it was time for Marcus to focus on his own growth rather than wondering about his exes. The conversation reinforced my decision to maintain no contact with Marcus. The whole experience taught me invaluable lessons about recognizing red flags in relationships and trusting my instincts when something feels wrong. I learned that love shouldn't feel like a competition and that the right person will choose you every day without hesitation or comparison to other options. Looking back, the birthday dinner disaster was actually a gift. It revealed Marcus's true character before I wasted any more time on someone who wasn't fully committed to our relationship. It also led me to Alex, who treats me with the respect and love I deserve. These days when friends share relationship problems, I always encourage them to trust their gut feelings about inappropriate behavior. If something feels wrong, it probably is, even if you can't articulate exactly why. The right person will never make you question your worth or compete for their attention. My advice to anyone dealing with a partner who maintains inappropriate contact with an ex is to set clear boundaries immediately. Don't try to be the cool, understanding girlfriend who tolerates disrespectful behavior. You deserve someone who is fully present in your relationship without emotional attachments to past partners. The birthday dinner from hell taught me that sometimes the worst moments in our lives redirect us towards something much better. Without Marcus's betrayal, I never would have met Alex or learned to value myself enough to demand the respect I deserve. Every terrible experience has the potential to become a blessing in disguise. The end. Author. Female wasn't backing down. Now it sits safely in my jewelry box where it belongs. The birthday dinner from hell ended up being one of the best things that happened to me. It revealed Marcus's true character and saved me from wasting more time on someone who didn't deserve my loyalty. Sometimes the worst surprises lead to the best outcomes. These days when I tell the story of my birthday dinner, people are always shocked by Marcus's audacity. The idea of inviting your ex-girlfriend to your current girlfriend's birthday dinner is so inappropriate that most people can't believe someone would actually do it, but it happened, and now it's a cautionary tale I share with friends about trusting your instincts. I'm planning my next birthday celebration now, and it's going to be everything that disaster dinner wasn't. Just me and people who actually care about celebrating me rather than using my special day for their own agenda. No ex-girlfriends allowed.